It all started with something I never thought would happen. I slept with my best friend's wife. Yeah, I know how that sounds. But it wasn't just some slip-up after too many drinks. It felt like I got caught in a web, and by the time I realized how tangled everything was, it was already too late. If I want to explain how I got here, I have to take you back to where it all began. Back when my world was still perfect, or at least, I thought it was. Claire was everything. I mean, when you marry someone, you believe you're signing up for forever. We were together for over a decade, married for 6 of those years, and in all that time, she was my everything. Claire wasn't just some arm candy. She was gorgeous, yes, but also smart as hell. She had this confidence that made everyone around her feel small, and somehow, I had the privilege of calling her mine. I never once thought I'd be talking about her like this. Then there's my career. I work in financial consulting, a stable gig, but demanding. Lots of travel, lots of lonely hotel rooms, and late-night emails. It was never a problem, though. Claire understood, or at least I thought she did. I figured, hey, as long as I was providing and doing my part, everything would be fine. And then there's Trevor, my best friend since college. That guy could charm the pants off anyone. Women flocked to him like moths to a flame, and he ate it up. But eventually, even Trevor claimed he wanted to settle down. He married Allison, a quiet, intelligent woman who seemed to balance out his wild side. I was happy for him. Trevor and Claire got along well, and between the 4 of us, life felt complete. You know how people say, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is? Yeah, I didn't see that coming. It was a few years back when I stumbled upon Trevor's dirty little secret. We were having dinner at my place, just like any other night. After the meal, Trevor left his phone on my kitchen counter while we cleaned up. A notification popped up. At first, I didn't mean to snoop, but then I saw the message, "Can't wait to see you tonight." It wasn't from Allison. One thing led to another, and there I was scrolling through his texts, my stomach twisting in knots. I found everything: flirty messages, plans for secret meetups, and even pictures. Trevor was screwing a younger co-worker, and I had all the proof. I confronted him that night. I laid it all out, no bullshit. Trevor tried to shrug it off, but I wasn't having it. I told him he needed to cut it out, go back to Allison, and fix his damn marriage. I swore I wouldn't tell a soul if he promised to end the affair. He agreed. I thought that would be the end of it. Then came the night everything started to unravel. Trevor and Allison came over for dinner at my place, just like old times. Claire was in the kitchen, and I was pouring drinks when I noticed Allison's eyes locked onto Trevor and Claire, her expression tight, like she was holding back something big. I figured maybe she'd had a rough day, so I didn't think much of it. But then she leaned in close to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "Have you ever wondered if there's more than just friendship between them?" she asked. I laughed it off, trying to play it cool, but Allison didn't. She just stared at me, dead serious, and said, "I think Trevor is cheating on me. And I think it's with your wife." That hit me like a truck. My first instinct was to tell her she was crazy, that Claire would never do that to me, and Trevor wouldn't be that stupid. But the way Allison looked at me, it was like she already knew something I didn't. "Just watch them," she whispered. "See how they are together." So we both peeked into the living room, trying not to make it obvious. There they were, Trevor and Claire, sitting a little too close, laughing a little too hard at some inside joke. At first, I told myself they were just comfortable around each other. But then Claire's hand brushed Trevor's arm, and the way he looked at her, something about it made my stomach twist. "This isn't the first time," Allison whispered, her voice so soft it felt like a knife dragging across my skin. "I think they've been meeting without us." My head was spinning, but I forced myself to stay calm. I didn't want to believe it. I mean, Claire and I had our problems like any couple, but cheating? No way. That wasn't us. But the way Allison planted that seed, it was like a crack in the foundation, and once you see a crack, you can't unsee it. After that conversation with Allison, I tried to push the thoughts out of my head. I told myself she was probably just paranoid, projecting her issues with Trevor onto me and Claire. But something had shifted. Once that seed of doubt was planted, it was like my brain wouldn't leave it alone. It sat there growing, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, it was already too late. Suspicion has a way of getting under your skin, and before I knew it, I started seeing things I'd never noticed before, or maybe things I didn't want to notice. I began paying attention to Claire in ways I hadn't before. Every time she smiled at her phone, every time she left the room to answer a call, it set me on edge. I started doing things I never thought I'd do. Checking her phone when she wasn't looking, browsing her social media late at night, and scrolling through her messages, hoping to find something. Anything. But there was nothing. Her phone was clean. Her social media looked normal. No secret chats, no hidden apps, no incriminating texts. At first, I felt relieved, but that relief didn't last long. If there were no signs, it didn't mean she was innocent. It meant she was just really good at hiding it. And once that idea got into my head, I was screwed. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, scrolling through her phone again like a madman, looking for something I must have missed. My mind started running wild, filling in the blanks where there were none. Every late text, every unexplained laugh, suddenly, everything felt like a clue. And then there was Allison. She knew exactly how to keep the fire burning. She started sending me these little messages, just enough to keep me suspicious, but not enough to give me any real answers. I saw Trevor texting Claire again, she'd write. Do you think they meet during lunch when you're at work? It was subtle, but it was enough to keep me hooked. Every time I thought I was being ridiculous, Allison would nudge me right back into that spiral. I couldn't tell if she was helping or if she had her own reasons for stirring the pot. But at that point, I didn't care. I just wanted the truth, no matter what it was. One day, I decided to test things for myself. Claire told me she had plans to meet a friend in the city, and I pretended everything was fine. But instead of staying at work, I cut the day short and drove home, hoping to catch them off guard if they were up to something. I don't even know what I expected to find. Trevor's car in the driveway? The two of them tangled up on the living room couch? Honestly, I didn't know what the hell I wanted, but I had to see it with my own eyes. When I got home, the house was dead quiet. No car in the driveway, no signs of anyone inside. Just the empty silence that made me feel like I was losing my mind. I walked through every room, checking closets like some idiot out of a bad movie, hoping, maybe even praying, I was wrong. But the house was empty. Nothing out of place. When Claire got home later, I was sitting on the couch, pretending like I hadn't been pacing the house all afternoon. She looked surprised to see me, but only for a second. Hey, I thought you had a late day today, she said, dropping her bag by the door. Yeah, things wrapped up early, I said, keeping my voice even. How was your day? She smiled, the way she always did, as if everything was perfectly normal. It was good. We stayed out a little longer than I expected, but it was nice to catch up. Stayed in the city? I asked, my voice casual, though every word she said felt like it was twisting in my gut. Yeah, she said, breezing past me to the kitchen. Just some window shopping and a long lunch. I nodded, pretending like I believed her, but I could feel the doubt clawing at the back of my mind. There was something in the way she answered, like it was too smooth, too rehearsed. Or maybe that was just the paranoia talking. Either way, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying straight to my face. That's the thing about suspicion. It makes you doubt everything, even the things you thought were rock solid. The paranoia had me by the throat, and it was slowly choking the life out of me and my marriage. Claire and I were still going through the motions. Dinners, conversations, sex when it happened, but it was like we were running on fumes. Everything felt off. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering where she really was when I wasn't around. Every time she laughed at her phone, every time Trevor's name came up in conversation, it was like a knife twisting deeper into my gut. Meanwhile, Allison was always there, poking at the wound. She knew exactly what to say, what little crumbs to drop, to keep me hooked. Guess who I just saw at the mall today? She texted one afternoon. Trevor. And Claire was with him. That didn't make any sense. Claire had told me she'd spent the whole day at home. When I asked her about it that evening, she was as cool as ever, sitting there on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she hadn't just shattered my sanity. All day at home, huh? I said casually, pretending like I wasn't already imagining her sneaking around with Trevor. Yep, she replied without even looking up. Why? I shrugged. Just curious. That was the thing about Claire, she was too damn smooth. She knew how to play things off so well that even when I was certain something was going on, she made me feel like I was crazy for even thinking it. Allison kept feeding me more coincidences, planting seeds in my head until I couldn't tell what was real and what was in my imagination. She'd arranged these chance encounters between Trevor and Claire. making sure I heard about them just often enough to stay suspicious. It was like she had me on a leash, pulling me deeper into the paranoia, making sure I couldn't see anything clearly. One night, I told Claire I had a late meeting. She kissed me goodbye, said she'd be home when I got back, and went on with her day like nothing was wrong. But instead of going to work, I doubled back, trailing her car through the city. I was ready to catch her meeting Trevor. I'd even imagined what I'd say, how I'd confront her. But she never met him. She went grocery shopping. That was it. No secret lover waiting in the parking lot. No stolen moments at a cafe. Just eggs, bread, and a bottle of wine. It didn't make sense. If she wasn't meeting Trevor, then why did Allison keep saying they were together? Was Claire just that good at covering her tracks? Or was Allison playing me for some reason I couldn't figure out yet? The paranoia didn't go away. It only got worse. Eventually, I couldn't hold it in anymore. One night, after she climbed into bed next to me, I turned to her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Claire," I started, keeping my voice steady. Do you think Trevor's maybe gotten too close to you?" She blinked at me, her expression shifting from confusion to annoyance. "What are you even talking about?" I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "I don't know. It's just, I've noticed how close you two are." Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw something I couldn't quite place. Shock? Anger? Guilt? I didn't know. Jesus, Jackson. Trevor is my friend. That's it. What the hell is wrong with you? I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the way she got so defensive, like I'd just accused her of the worst possible crime, it didn't sit right with me. If there was nothing going on, why get so angry? The doubts kept piling up, and I felt like I was drowning. That's when Allison invited me over for dinner. We opened a bottle of wine, then another. It didn't take long before we were both buzzed, the kind of buzz where you stop caring about consequences. Allison leaned in closer, her voice low and smooth. "If they're betraying us, we should do the same. Let's even the score." I laughed it off at first, but Allison wasn't joking. Her hand brushed against my arm, and suddenly the air between us felt heavier, hotter. "Allison," I tried to say no, but the words died in my throat. She smiled, this slow, knowing smile, and poured me another glass of wine. "Come on, Jackson. Don't we deserve something for ourselves?" I wish I could say I held strong, that I walked away, but I didn't. The wine, the frustration, the betrayal, they all swirled together until I couldn't think straight. One minute we were sitting across from each other, and the next we were tangled up on the couch, tearing at each other's clothes like people possessed. It was reckless, stupid, and dangerous. But in that moment, I didn't care. It felt like the only thing that made sense, the only way to fight back against whatever was happening to my life. Afterward, lying there in the aftermath, Allison lit a cigarette and looked at me with that same sly smile. "We should record this," she said casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "In case we need proof." I was too drunk and too far gone to argue. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and let the camera capture everything: our bodies, our anger, our betrayal. It felt like the ultimate act of revenge. But as soon as the adrenaline faded, the guilt hit me like a brick wall. What the hell had I done? I woke up the next morning, my head pounding and my stomach twisted into knots. For a split second, I thought maybe it had all been a nightmare. But then I turned my head, and there she was, Allison, lying next to me, looking as calm as a cat that had just swallowed a bird. The memory of what we'd done hit me like a slap in the face. I sat up, rubbing my hands over my face, trying to piece together how the hell I'd let things get this far. I knew it was wrong. I knew it the second I crossed that line. But the damage was done. There was no going back. Allison, on the other hand, didn't seem to have a care in the world. She stretched, smiling like we'd just shared some grand joke. "We need to show them," she said, her voice disturbingly casual. I stared at her, still groggy from the wine and the guilt. "What?" "The video," she said, lighting a cigarette like this was all just another day. "It's time." "Jesus, Allison, what the hell are you talking about?" I said, my voice hoarse. "We have to confront them, Jackson. They need to see what happens when they screw us over." I wanted to throw up. The wine, the betrayal, the shame, it all churned together in my gut. "Allison, I don't know if..." Yes, you do. She cut me off. There's no going back now. They deserve this. I felt cornered, like I'd crawled into a trap, and now the walls were closing in. But the way she looked at me, all cold determination, I knew she wasn't going to let me wriggle my way out of this. I was in too deep. There was no clean way out. Against every instinct screaming at me to stop, I nodded. The confrontation happened the next evening. Claire walked into the house, her usual cool, collected self. I could barely keep it together, my palms slick with sweat as I sat her down on the couch. I need to show you something, I said, my voice flat and brittle. She raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed. What is this about, Jackson? I took out my phone, heart hammering in my chest, and pressed play. The video came to life, grainy footage of Allison and me tangled in sheets, drunk, angry, desperate. I couldn't even look at Claire. I stared at the floor, waiting for her reaction, bracing for the explosion. When the video ended, there was a long silence. I finally glanced up. Claire was sitting perfectly still, her face pale, her eyes wide. But it wasn't shock or sadness that registered. It was rage. You did this, she whispered, her voice low and deadly. Because of some stupid, paranoid fantasy? I blinked, struggling to process her reaction. This wasn't guilt. This was fury. I never betrayed you, Jackson. Not once. And you did this? She stood up, her face twisted with disgust. You slept with Allison because you convinced yourself I was cheating? Before I could respond, Trevor walked in, his face dark with confusion. Behind him, Allison followed, that same smug expression still plastered on her face. What the hell is going on? Trevor demanded. Allison wasted no time. We know everything, Trevor. We know about you and Claire. Trevor looked genuinely bewildered. What the hell are you talking about? Claire rounded on him, her voice sharp as glass. She thinks we've been having an affair. Trevor's eyes widened as the absurdity hit him. You think Claire and I? He shook his head, disbelief giving way to fury. Jesus Christ, Alison, you're insane. And that's when the real truth came crashing down. Trevor turned to me, his jaw clenched. You want to know what this is about, Jackson? She's punishing me. Allison found out about my old affair years ago, and now she's dragged you into her little revenge scheme. Allison didn't even flinch. You deserved it, she said coolly. I just gave Jackson a nudge. The rest was all him. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Every suspicious text, every staged coincidence. It was all part of her twisted game. And I played right into it. Claire's laugh was bitter and cold. You're pathetic, Jackson. You let her manipulate you into wrecking our marriage. All because you couldn't trust me. I tried to explain, tried to apologize, but Claire wasn't having any of it. It's too late for that, she snapped. You threw everything away. Trevor stood there, shaking his head, disgust written all over his face. I'm done, Allison, he said, his voice low with finality. We're done. The fallout was fast and brutal. Claire and I filed for divorce within days. She couldn't forgive me, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. I had let jealousy and paranoia rot away everything we had built. Trevor left Allison, too, walking out of their marriage without a second thought. I don't think either of us even spoke again after that night. 2 marriages shattered. And for what? Some sick game, fueled by lies and suspicion. After the divorce, everything felt like it had collapsed into an empty void. I was left standing in the wreckage, trying to make sense of how the life I thought was solid as stone had crumbled overnight. Claire was gone. Trevor was out of my life. Allison? I didn't even want to think about her. And worst of all, I was stuck with myself, haunted by the choices I had made, choices that tore my world apart. The silence in my apartment was unbearable. Days blurred into nights. I'd sit on the couch, nursing a bottle of whiskey, replaying every fight, every lie, every missed signal. I tried to convince myself that Claire had been innocent, that I had ruined everything with my paranoia. But the truth? The truth was even worse. I knew I had let my insecurities destroy the one thing I cared about most. Claire. I thought she was my forever, and I had thrown it all away on a suspicion I couldn't even prove. The worst part was Claire moved on so quickly. I'd see glimpses of her on social media, laughing with friends, traveling, looking like none of it had ever happened. Meanwhile, I was sinking. She seemed fine without me, like I had been nothing more than a chapter in her story, while I was left with nothing but regret. Then, out of the blue, came the message. I was sitting on my bed, scrolling aimlessly through my phone when the notification popped up. No sender. No context. Just an anonymous number with a string of photographs attached. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened them. And there she was, Claire, smiling, kissing, wrapped around some other guy. The timestamps on the photos told the whole story. These weren't new. They went back years. Years during the time we were married. Claire had been having an affair, and not with Trevor. My heart dropped into my stomach as I scrolled through the images, each one hammering the truth deeper into my mind. This wasn't some fling. This was a relationship. Dinners, vacations, hotel rooms. It had been right in front of me the whole time, and I'd been too busy chasing ghosts with Allison to see the truth. Claire had been playing me all along. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking, feeling the crushing weight of it all sink in. All that paranoia about Trevor? It had been a smokescreen, distracting me from the real betrayal right under my nose. Claire had been living a double life, and I had been too blind to see it. I thought I'd hit rock bottom before, but this was a new kind of hell. Knowing that I had torn everything apart, my marriage, my friendships, while the real betrayal had been happening the entire time. I felt like the world's biggest fool. After everything fell apart, I felt like a hollow shell, drifting through life without purpose. Waking up in my empty apartment was unbearable. The silence was suffocating. Every corner of the place carried memories I couldn't escape. The bed I used to share with Claire, the kitchen where we laughed, the couch where we watched movies. I hated it. I hated how familiar everything felt, even though it all belonged to a past I could never get back. The days passed in a blur. I drink too much, sleep too little, and stare at my phone, tempted to scroll through Claire's social media again, even though I knew it would only twist the knife deeper. Watching her live her life, smiling, traveling, laughing with friends, while I was falling apart, it was like I was the only one who hadn't gotten the memo that we were supposed to move on. The apartment became a prison, and every hour I spent in it felt heavier than the last. One morning I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag, booked the first flight I found, and left. No plan, no itinerary, just the need to get as far away from everything as possible. I thought if I could put some distance between me and the wreckage of my life, maybe I'd find some clarity, or at least a little peace. I traveled without direction, hopping between cities and countries, staying in cheap hotels, living out of my suitcase. I explored old streets, wandered markets, drank in local bars, and sat alone in cafes, trying to reconnect with myself, or whatever was left of me. But the loneliness followed me wherever I went, lurking in every quiet moment. The pain didn't disappear just because I was somewhere new. It stayed, festering inside me, gnawing away at what little strength I had left. Then, one evening, in a small coastal town where the waves rolled in like a heartbeat, I met Rachel. She was sitting at the bar, nursing a glass of wine, lost in thought. There was something about her, maybe the tiredness in her eyes, or the way she stared into her drink as if trying to solve a riddle, that drew me in. I wasn't looking for conversation, but somehow, I found myself sitting beside her. We exchanged a few polite words at first, just the usual talk between two strangers. The weather, the beach, the local food. But there was an undercurrent to the conversation, something heavier, unspoken but shared. It felt like we were both carrying the same kind of weight, the kind only someone who's been broken can recognize in another. After a while, the words came easier. Rachel opened up about her breakup, how the man she trusted with everything had shattered her heart. It wasn't the first time someone had hurt her, she admitted, but it was the one that finally left her drained. As she spoke, I found myself nodding, understanding every word because I had been there too. Hell, I was still there. I told her my story, though I held back the ugliest details at first. I didn't mention the video or the full extent of the betrayal, but I gave her enough to let her know I wasn't just some tourist passing through. I was a man on the run from his own past. Over the next few days, Rachel and I kept finding each other. On morning walks along the beach, at the same cafe for lunch, at the bar in the evenings. It was never planned, but it always felt right. The conversations grew deeper, the silences more comfortable. She understood the things I couldn't say, and I started to realize that maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. At first, I was cautious. I wasn't ready to trust anyone again, not after what happened with Claire. But Rachel didn't push. She let me take my time, and little by little, I let my guard down. We shared more